I'm Kevin Power, and this is SaskScapes, the podcast featuring stories of arts, culture, and heritage in Saskatchewan. Welcome to episode 103 of SaskScapes. This is the sixth episode in a series entitled German Culture Alive, and this series is made possible thanks to the generous sponsorship of the Saskatchewan German Council. The Saskatchewan German Council is a provincial nonprofit umbrella organization to nearly 40 member groups, representing all people of German-speaking backgrounds. By engaging people of all ages to become active and involved partners in a vibrant multicultural community, the Saskatchewan German Council is committed to the preservation and promotion of the German language, traditions, and culture for all people of Saskatchewan. You'll find the link to their website in the show notes. Okay, just a little bit of business before I begin. You know how I'm always telling you that you can download the podcast series SaskScapes from all of the major podcasting apps. Well, if you also happen to subscribe to audible.com, you'll find SaskScapes there in the podcast section of Audible, so you can listen to it there as well. Now, I'm always saying please go to the iTunes Store or Google Play and leave your ratings and reviews. Now, I'm not requesting that you do this to boost my own ego. I'm requesting you to do this so that the podcast series SaskScapes can be moved up in the rankings of podcasts within the culture and society category. And the higher in the list we go, the more chances people will listen to your stories. So please take some time to go over to iTunes and Google Play Store and let me know what you think. I always love to hear from you. Okay, on to the episode. Fritz Stehwien was a German-Canadian artist who painted and sketched an estimated 10,000 works in his lifetime. Since his passing in 2008, at the age of nearly 94, it has become a labor of love for my guest, Barbara Stehwien, to preserve these pieces, some of which have suffered deterioration over the years. Some of it folded up as if to tuck away into a pocket. There's even a history and a story inside those creases. This episode is a continuation of my conversation with Waltraud Stehwien in episode 102. Barbara is the daughter of Fritz and Waltraud, so who better to speak on the scope of this man's work? Before his passing, Fritz expressed to the family that all the works could be thrown out. Thank goodness Barbara refused to do that. Had she, we would be deprived of one of Canada's most prolific painters. As Barbara so profoundly stated during our conversation, there was no Fritz without his paintbrush. He leaves behind an illustrated life. And get this, the city of Saskatoon will officially name a street after Fritz and his family. The combined artwork of Fritz, Waltraud, and Waltraud's father deserve to be remembered with this tribute. Now, please go and check out the show notes. There's all kinds of links to all the blogs where you can see artwork of both artists and read more information about them. So take some time to do that. Okay, here's my conversation with Barbara Stehwien. Okay, well, this last episode with Waltraud was the first episode that I recorded face-to-face with somebody, and 2 days later, here I am once again face-to-face with someone who actually was at the table during that podcast, but remained a silent partner through it all, and that is Barbara Stehwien, who is Waltraud's daughter. And we remember hearing about her in that podcast a little bit. So, and this is also the very first time I've ever recorded a podcast in a garage. We are, in fact, in Barbara's garage, which has been transformed into this fabulous gallery space. filled with artwork. Every inch of every wall and every inch of every table has artwork displayed and laid out in a very organized manner. So what is this art? Who is the artist? And that's what we're here to talk about. In fact, we're here to talk about Fritz Stehwien, who is Barbara's father, who we remember from Valtraud's story. She married an artist because she had to, and he came over to Saskatchewan because there were some relatives here, and he was only supposed to be here for a month, and he stayed for 2, and then eventually, when it didn't look like he was going back, she figured, well, he must like it there, and that's how they wound up being here in Canada. But I would like to find out more about Fritz and what his art form was. So that's why Barbara's here. Hello again, Barbara.
Hello, Kevin. Welcome to our lovely chaos of paintings. You said organized, but it's really a lovely chaos.
Well, it looks like the kind of gallery an artist would have, where things are leaning and hanging, and that's just sort of what I always associate with being an artist. I've seen museums that are a lot more chaotic than this.
Yes, this is true.
Yeah, so
it's just too much to display properly, so it leans and it is fun to search through. It's great. Yeah.
And there's a great energy about the space. So Fritz's story, I can't remember if we touched on where he was born in Germany. Can you remind us if we did?
He was born in a very small village, really.
Yeah.
To laborers of the time. His father had a big garage, and he was building wagon wheels and things and farming a bit. Right. But he was just driven to sketch everything.
Right. And this was in the
central Germany, not very far from the city where my parents met.
Right. And this was in the 1920s?
1914.
1914?
He was born. Yes. So quite a bit older than my mother.
Right.
But it was a great meeting for the two of them, I would say, in art school.
Yeah, and we'll touch on that again. Mm-hmm. So he didn't come from an artistic family necessarily?
Not at all, I would say. Not at all. Really true farmers, laborers, hard workers. His sister had a restaurant, hotel kind of thing, and they just all worked in the small village to make a living.
I wonder what impression it makes on parents at that time in history when your son says, I want to be an artist, especially when the family are mostly laborers, and which is important to survival. Have you had any stories about how they initially reacted to that?
Absolutely, yes. I think it was unfortunately looked down upon.
Yeah.
And he was mechanically inclined, so he did tell me, it was a choice between motorcycle mechanics and art. But his mother recognized his talent and said, he is a sensitive boy, let's send him to art school.
You gotta love moms for that.
Gotta love moms, yes. So he started taking an apprenticeship to paint churches and stuccos for the houses with murals on and things like that. So it was useful to them as well as artistic for him. So it was a great start to his career.
Were art supplies easily available during that time?
I think before the Second World War, yes. It wasn't so bad. He ended up in Hamburg at the Art Academy to actually study painting and art after this church painting thing didn't, seem like the obvious choice for him.
But that's not where the two met.
No. Right, that was later. They didn't meet until after the war.
Right. So he had no formal training going into the art school in Hamburg.
No, this was going to be his career. He did study in the Saskatoon size nearest town for these frescoes, these murals. That was a thing of the day.
Right.
You needed people to do that. And then Hamburg was where he studied. But then the war interfered and he had to become a soldier. And that was not good for him.
Now, had he sort of made a name for himself in the art school? Clearly, the man was prolific. So, did that begin in art school? Did he get a reputation?
He had won prizes in Hamburg already, but the government was already getting a little sketchy in the 1930s, early 40s. And then the war, when he was a soldier, he could not help but use his artistic abilities to impress the generals, right? And he would sketch them, or they would see, oh, wow, he could really document some of this destruction.
Right.
And he did. And some paintings actually survived from that time. So this is the first step of him actually surviving that war. That some higher generals would keep him away from the front to use him for reporting and propaganda and sketching, because photography wasn't that, easily available as it is today.
Oh, that's great that they recognized it and didn't see it as some frivolous activity that it break the habit.
There was no Fritz without his paintbrush.
Did any of his artwork, if any of it was kept by these generals? I mean, is it floating around out there in somebody's family?
That's hard to say. I really don't think so, because after the war, the chaos and the generals possibly getting prosecuted, persecuted.
Right.
Fritz lost so many of his things even.
Yeah.
Lots of people were walking, right? They didn't have anything. Right. So I would say not much, except what he hung on to himself and somehow managed to get here. That has survived.
Right, similar to Valtraud's story.
And some of them are portraits of these military men that he charmed with his paintbrush.
I can't quite get my head around what it must feel like to leave one's personal artwork behind when one is fleeing. You must really have to force yourself to detach from it.
He was pretty desperate to take it along.
Yeah.
And I see that when I look through these now, lots of them are cut up, folded, so they fit in a small spot. Oh, I think of writers with their manuscripts. It was their thing, right?
Right.
They didn't have a recording of it. They didn't have a picture of it. So they stashed it. I have fascinating stories. It was really good until after the war when he managed to get home. I wrote up that story with my daughter and basically started over because Hamburg was destroyed. His apartment was destroyed. Yeah. All he had was his family home in this small village. And from then he went to the school in Halle in Germany.
Isn't that interesting? Because at the same time, Valtraud's family had found their way back to back there as well in Halle, and they were basically building from scratch as well. So it must have been a common theme for a lot of people.
I think so.
Yeah.
Because we do have a parallel one of an artist friend.
Yeah.
Where Fritz and this particular Wolfgang met in the Russian prison camp.
Right.
And separated, long story, but found each other again in Halle as well because of the big art gallery. Wolfgang person was looking for his parents through the Red Cross. And then he saw Fritz's artwork in the gallery, so they met as well. It was really a series of lucky coincidences that it went along as it did.
Yeah, what a magical time and being in the right place at the right time.
Yes.
And that's where the two met.
Mm-hmm.
Valtraud was not working with her puppets in that art school. She was working on the discipline of art. That was the purpose of the art school, was to learn the fundamentals and the rudiments of art.
Yes.
And the drawing and the painting and all of that. So they would have been both in a similar headspace when they were at that school where they were both doing it together. Any stories on, have you ever found out what their first date was like or what was like when, There's always a first date story.
Both my parents and Fritz, certainly, they just glow. It's like a memory of your high school prom. You would have parties and you would have like-minded, talented artists that are decorating the halls, that are dressing up, that are making jokes, that are falling in love with each other. The atmosphere must have been so positive. And they were so creative, all of them. They still know each other. And I actually have a fellow in the city of Halle who collects paintings from all these men.
Oh.
Yes. And Waltraud looks at the photographs and she says, this is him, this is him. Oh, yeah, and he married her and they did this.
Oh.
It's fascinating.
That's fascinating.
Yes, and I have some portraits of some of these people as well.
Wow.
So it's really great to ask her these stories now that my father has passed.
Right.
And to live in their young years.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I wonder, well, I'm always curious about where their two art forms, where their two passions intersect. I mean, he's painting and she's found her way back to puppetry. Was there a marriage of art forms there? I mean, would he have painted backdrops at some point? Did they?
Yes.
They
was still specializing in murals.
Yes.
Right. So they did lots of, I wouldn't say offices, but theaters that had big murals. He would design those.
Right.
So that's kind of like graphic arts, which is really a strength in my mother as well. You can see it in her 2D works.
Yes. Yeah.
So that was really their common thing. And as any visual artist, you could tell they both could see, right? Lots of folks don't necessarily see the same way.
Yeah. What prompted him to come to visit his sister in Saskatchewan?
I would say it was her invitation.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he was ready to explore and get out of there? This
family, the Stehwien family, a lot of them seemed to leave that little village and go for Canada, which was the paradise, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It wasn't uncommon. And I think his niece went first as a young girl. She didn't like the gossip town. So she went. And then she said to her mother, come on over. And similarly, her mother then said to her brother, come on over. It's nice here. And with the political upheaval here and there from the Nazism to the communism, and then in West Germany, which was flourishing, and so many artists trying to make their life, he said, I'm going to go. And here he fell in love with the landscape and the seemingly easier living.
Now, I'll try to refer to the fact that when she knew she was going to a cultural, I can't remember the word she used, a cultural wasteland, really. There was nothing. Although I'm sure the good people of North Battleford would take exception to the fact that they have great, vibrant, artistic community there.
Yes.
But perhaps not then. So he must have known that as well. Yes. That he was coming to a relatively culturally banned.
He could feel it.
Yeah.
Pretty much the minute that he was introduced to anybody.
Right.
Apparently the whole town had called him Uncle Fritz, and he would show off, get out his paintbrush, or as he often did, get out charcoal and sketch you, the likeness of yourself. And people would watch him and they'd be so impressed. Can I have one? Can you do this for me? And he would do it. Right. And this is really the comparison of an art school environment versus a prairie town where, like his village, people work hard to survive and have their community gatherings and play music and do painting and things. But this art school atmosphere, he kind of brought that with him, and people were really impressed. And
his love of the landscape. Really, I mean, he didn't really need a big community around him because he was basically, destined to do it anyway. And he was in such a glorious landscape, which we see in so much of the artwork. So, I could see why that wouldn't have been, an arduous task artistically to be there, because he just launched right into it.
Yes. He did the same thing in Germany as well. Right. He would take us as children, everybody had the sketch pad and the crayons or something, and he would say, look how beautiful it is, sketch it. Well, we didn't want to. We wanted to climb trees and break branches and throw rocks. Look how beautiful that looks. So we had to do that. He was really a fresh air man, and he'd go out and enjoy the nature and try to share it. Yeah. And when we came here, that really continued in a big way.
Was he able to make a living with his art?
Yes, yes.
Wow.
Not as prolific as his production, but
Right.
he and Waltraud were a good team.
Yeah.
They, especially coming here, because there was so much more interest in his art and in having exhibits and in people seeing their beautiful prairies and their lakes and their elevators painted for them. So they would come to galleries, and it was great. We did Yorkton, Swift Current, Battleford, Saskatoon. He did not have that in Germany, so
Right.
it was fantastic for him. And my mother and even my sisters were involved. My sister's a goldsmith. My other sister is a photographer. So it just came out, and we even had, combined exhibitions.
And a brother who's an architect, right?
No, he's an engineer.
An engineer.
He's an engineer.
I knew there was.
Yes.
Where do you fall in the rankings? Are you the eldest?
I am the youngest.
Aha.
Yes.
As am I. We're special. We're special people. Yeah.
Yes. And I felt very much that I did not have that clear direction that my siblings had. So I had a love for engineering, science, chemistry, and art. So
wow,
that's how I ended up here, I think, because I do love the art. But as a career, I'm actually a geoscientist.
Really?
Yes.
And is that the field you worked in?
Yes, yes.
Oh, at the university?
No, I'm a consultant.
Oh, you are?
I work at home. I worked at home before everyone worked at home.
Wow.
I loved it, yes.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anything about that field. What significant contributions?
Exploration. You're looking for gold, and I'm sure you must have heard the Diamond Rush and uranium in Saskatchewan. Yeah. I'm involved in that.
Oh, yes. Right.
It's great.
Right. Wow, that's fantastic. Where were you born in the timeline? In Saskatoon?
In Halle.
In Halle.
All four of us.
Oh, you. Right. Yes. Right. Of course.
Mm-hmm.
How old?
This artist couple dragged these 4 children with them in all these trips.
How old were you when you guys left?
We left Eastern Germany when I was 2 years old. So my sisters remember a little bit. I don't really.
Right.
And then we couldn't go back. So it was this mysterious place I came from but didn't know. And then the 10 years in Southern Germany, beautiful landscapes, was basically where I was raised. But then 1968, I was a young teenager coming to Saskatoon. So I kind of grew up in both countries.
So you wouldn't have been old enough to remember even the trip over?
Absolutely. It was heaven. It was heaven.
Oh, well, part of it was, according to what Valtra said, she said
on a ship.
The ship was, but the train not so much.
I loved the train, but
she didn't seem to be.
She didn't, because you couldn't open windows. And we had spent our money on the boat, the SS France, which was a very classy luxury liner for those days and for us. So we thought, we can just do the train with the leftover money. We didn't get the sleeping compartments. Right. So we had 8 seats for the 6 of us.
Oh, believe me, I've taken the train across the country 7 times. You don't want to do general coach.
And people still smoked, and there was no windows to open. My mother was devastated. It didn't bother me at all. I thought this was exciting.
Well, such a big adventure for a kid.
Yes. Yeah, it was.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking at this phenomenal collection, which is a lifetime of work. And it's sitting in your garage. Is it anywhere else is it hanging anywhere else in the province? Any of his work?
There are many items in private collections.
Okay.
Many also where he donated a lot to the St. Paul's and Boys and Girls Clubs, these auctions that would go on.
Right.
So people wanted to decorate their offices would buy them. And we don't know who bought them. Yeah. So, yes, they are hanging. But in his travels, Taiwan was one of them. Australia, of course, with family. There's paintings everywhere. The government here has a couple, I think. The university probably has one. It's not huge because they chose not to go the gallery way, which apparently is a typical way to sell art. But that was not so much to their liking because, especially in communist days, you're told what to paint. You're told how to create. This was a problem for my grandfather as well. He was told what puppet plays he could play.
Uh-huh.
And both my father, my mother and my grandfather, all three of them would say, no, I can't do that. That's not me.
Right.
So he just painted and sold privately. He gave lessons. And to be honest, their record keeping wasn't the best, so I don't really know where they all are.
Yeah.
Which is why I made the internet blog inviting people who have art.
Right.
Here's information. If you want to show me what you have, I can give you information on it, and I can keep the records because I'm doing a big documentation of all this stuff.
Those links will be in the show notes for the website, so people will be able to access it pretty quickly. Yeah. So,
but it is the thing these days where people type in the name, when the kids are inheriting their parents' artwork.
Right.
And they're looking, and they'll look it up, and they'll find me. I'm hoping.
Hey, it's Kevin. I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Just a quick reminder that the SaskScapes podcast is available for free on your favorite podcast app, or you can stream it from your browser. Check out the show notes for the link. On the SaskScapes homepage, you'll notice something new under the logo called SaskScapes Plus. You can't miss it. There's a big button saying support with a heart icon next to it. I'd love it if you could click on that button and help keep this podcast series going. When SaskScapes launched in May 2014, it was the first podcast in the province celebrating arts, culture, and heritage. In fact, you'd have been pretty hard-pressed to find any Saskatchewan podcasts. So I'd like to think that we paved the way. It's been because of your support that this podcast is now in its 9th year. Okay, that's it. Enjoy the rest of the episode. But there's so much here. Did you have to go scrounging for some of it, or had it really just stayed in the family?
I didn't have to go scrounging.
No, it was everywhere. You couldn't avoid it.
Yes, we have to sort. We have to throw out things, sadly. Unfinished items, repeat items. Because an oil painting takes the mylar, the transparency sketch, the initial one.
Yeah.
And then a whole bunch of other sketches and portraits. He always has 4 or 5 of them, pre-sketches, and wants to make sure people like themselves on it. Mm-hmm. So there's 4 or 5 of each left over. What do I do with it? I have to make many decisions. The house is still full. This garage isn't everything. And I am aware that there are many lost, many donated, many sold paintings that I have no record of.
Right. So what are you, and in conjunction also with your daughter, what are you currently working on? What's the big, massive project? Is it digitizing all of this now?
We have completed majority of the digitizing. We rented a scanner the size of a single bed.
Yeah.
So we could put these on. Because many of them, unfortunately, were not well stored. You can see you can't store these well in a basement.
Yeah.
Basements would flood. And in the later years, unfortunately, he was with illness and age. He was not able to keep control. So they would sit in the basement and sink into themselves. So many have mold in the back. So the scanning, the digital image is the answer. I'm making books. I'm showing, I'm selling prints. I'm inviting people here if they're interested in something. I'm doing shows at the artisan fairs.
Yeah.
Made art cards. So just to bring it out.
Yeah.
Instead of having it in the basement, bring it out. People can see and enjoy.
Where the digitized images ultimately going to live? I mean, it's a lot that you've digitized. Will it have its? I mean, I know we can see some of it on the blog sites, but is it your intention to create a one-stop entire collection?
I think not.
So you're just digitizing it so that you have this in the family, so that the deterioration doesn't get worse. So that right.
Yes. I remember the conversations in the last 5-10 years of his life, where you could see he had lost control because there was so much. Mm-hmm. And he said, when I die, you can throw it all out. And I thought, no.
He didn't mean that.
He did.
Really?
I think it came from his heart to say, I can't, it's too much, I can't do it.
Yeah.
And then when he did die and my mother looked at this stuff, she said the same thing. She said, you could see it. I have a photo of her face that says, I can't do this. So I said, Mom, I'm the next generation. I can do this. We'll buy you a condo and I'll do this. And I'm loving it. I can't throw it out. It's beautiful. And I just want to share it and show it.
I can see that for her looking at this, is bittersweet because she probably feels very close to him when she's this. That's so great that you care enough to hang on to this.
So many people say, "Oh my, this is all hiding here. Bring it out."
Yeah, that breaks my heart.
So that's what I'm working on.
It needs a showing somehow.
Yeah. And I found books is a fantastic route. But I have all this stuff and I don't really know. Other than I wanted to document it. That was my first desire, my first project. And we're really close to having that finished. And now the books are a way for people to come, especially in pandemic days.
Yeah.
It's your little art gallery. The art galleries were closed. Here, take a look.
Right.
And you could have it in your pocket. So we sold quite well at these artisan fairs.
Uh-huh.
People probably don't have room for big paintings anyway, so they can see what he's done, what he's all about.
Yeah.
It feels good to be able to share it in that small way.
Right. Now, do we have to drive to the garage to get our hands on these books, or are they on Amazon or through McNally's?
We haven't gone the Amazon route yet, but yes, you can get them at McNally's, and I do have a Stehwien.art website where you can purchase. And if you think you want to come to a gallery, make an appointment.
Yeah.
If you want original art.
Yeah.
But I'm slowly starting to get, the online shopping happening. That takes time as well.
Yeah.
So, and the printing up took time. And we want to continue these projects. And when people go on the internet and just do, the nice thing about the pandemic again and the internet is that it kind of forced me to do that.
Right.
And now I have countrywide, if not worldwide, people looking in and ordering things.
Did he have a favorite spot in Saskatchewan that he loved painting the most? That's probably as dumb a question as me asking Valtraude if she had a favorite puppet. Yeah.
No, he did not.
Yeah,
no.
Everything was an inspiration.
I know how often my mother, who tried to keep an organized life, he would say, "It's a nice day, let's go drive."
Right.
Off they would go,
Yeah.
So I have incredible treasury of photographs of him. I called it All the World's an Easel.
Yeah, some of those are on the blog site.
Yes, where he just sits in the oddest way just to get this, and then sets up his painting and his canvas in the grass. And
no photography for him. It's all about painting.
All about
old
painting.
School.
Yes, right. I have that line as well where I say, he leaves behind a fully illustrated life without ever holding a camera in his hand. He never took a photograph.
Yeah.
But boy, did he paint everything.
Was he recognized with any special honor during his career here in Saskatchewan or back home? Yeah, I mean, what are there still family in Germany?
Yes.
So do they have a connection to this artwork?
Absolutely. Yes,
okay. And did he, I know that Valtraude, she had donated some of her puppets. Was there something similar that happened for him?
Not yet.
No.
Not yet.
That will.
I'm working towards that, and that really is the reason I want to document everything.
Yeah.
So that I know where things are going. And I'm starting to look at possibly donating or whatever. But he did get recognition, not the huge ones, but here and there. And then I think he got a certificate. Lieutenant Governor of Saskatchewan for whatever certificate. Sorry, I'm not very good with that.
Yeah, okay.
But we had nominated him for Lifetime Achievement Award.
Yes.
What I didn't know at that time was that was all art forms.
Right.
So he was up against drama and music. And then I realized, that is not likely going to work. But in the end, he did get the certificate. So that's recognition. And He will have a street named after him.
Oh, that's right. I read about.
Saskatoon.
Yeah, that's right. And what? It's one of the newer subdivisions.
Aspen Ridge. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
How do you pull that one
happen?
off? Yeah.
It's actually, I'm guilty, a birthday present for him for his 90th birthday. And about that time, he also had a show in Germany, in Absentia. A fellow back in that little small village thought, oh, wow. And he invited people who had his artwork to bring it. And we sent some things. And he did this fantastic show in a little cathedral. And I thought, yes, he's getting recognition. This is fantastic. Everyone back home is remembering him. And I thought, I'm going to do something here. So I applied to the city. And, you know, we have some fantastic Saskatoon paintings.
Yes.
And they thought, yes, definitely. I had asked for a park. So for Stehwien Park, somewhere by the river, because he loved to do the river.
Yeah.
That turned out to be a street, which is fine. And the silver lining in that is that all the Stehwiens are now recognized. My mom and my dad, without, you know, you can't leave her out. She's very important for Saskatchewan art as well.
When does the sign go up?
I don't know. I was out there the other day, and it's pretty much prairie so far.
Right. Yeah, when it does.
But the plans are up on the internet. And,
will you have a family event?
Oh, well, my daughter, the one that lives in Saskatoon, and her husband, they're thinking of buying. You know, she says, I want to live on Stehwien Street.
Yeah, no kidding.
What a mouthful.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a street called Power Terrace.
Excellent.
So, but it just
Is
happened.
this after your?
Well, the whole family. The land was given to my grandfather. So all of his children built houses on it. So for better or for worse, we all lived right on top of each other.
So this is the same story, only a generation later. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's take a little bit of a walk around, because there has to be some stories behind some of this work. So I'll let you lead, and I'll do my best to be descriptive, because of course this is not a visual medium. But take me to some of the pieces that would have some really fascinating stories behind them. So you mentioned some of the portraits.
In that case, I would take you back to the reason that I live is because he escaped that prison camp. And we have some originals. This is actually a small town very near to where he was born, where he would hang out as a young man. And this would be the cathedral that they did that show in 2004.
Oh,
he
right.
was 90.
So we're looking at a table of non-framed artwork that I can see really has endured over time. There's one of the folds in the painting. I mean, it's probably got folded up at some point.
Yes, it is surprising that they survived.
Yeah, it's very fragile paper.
It boggles my mind because before my time, and I'm not the youngest anymore, and this is one of the Russian generals that we believe helped him make it home from that prison camp.
Do you have a name?
No.
Oh, wouldn't it be fascinating to find out his family?
My daughter and I went to Poland, which is where that prison camp was, part of that research, and they saw this. They're wartime researchers, and they said, we'll find out for you who that is. We'll put it in the internet. But that was 7 years ago. They haven't found out who it is. And then materials were scarce, of course.
Oh, so he painted on the back.
So he painted on the back because he didn't need this anymore, right? He was home now. He painted on the back, and that is that same town, and that is back home.
The general didn't want it?
He probably got another one. This was one thing in my discovery. When I was very devastated that things were water damaged beyond repair.
So we're looking at a very frayed...
moldy, water damage.
Oh, yeah. Well, that
as I continue to clean up and sort, there'd be another one.
Yeah.
So I'd feel much better. And this is the thing, he would always paint another one and another one. So I think this general did get his painting. Absolutely. He just
Will these ultimately be framed, the ones that have not completely deteriorated?
I had a young art graduate here not long ago, and she said, yes, I can make you a frame. And you can hang it up double-sided.
Right.
It's great, yes.
Right. But these old pieces that are laid out here on the table, they're the equivalent of a journal, a written journal. They chronicle his life, truly.
Absolutely.
For the listeners, there are so many, it boggles the mind. The
wonderful thing is these selfies, I call them. Selfies he did.
So this is him.
Those are self-portraits, yes. You can see him looking in the mirror and just forever painting himself. There's about, I would say, 200 of them.
Really? That are all of him?
That are all of him in various, times and ages and media. Lots of them charcoal sketches, even on wrapping paper.
Right.
Just because he was in front of the mirror, and I thought, look at this mood that I'm in. Let me just sketch myself. It's fantastic. It's fantastic.
Was he an introvert? Was he most happy when he was away from people and totally engrossed?
He was a very quiet man.
Really?
And his way to communicate was to sketch. He loved it when he was someplace and people would stand behind him and watch him sketch.
Right.
I actually have a little video that I put on the internet.
Yes, I saw that on, with
him doing a portrait, and he's just in his element.
Yeah.
He's just so happy. Yeah.
I think it's so great that you've got this desire to pay tribute to your dad and to hang on to all of this. It really, what's your favorite? I don't know why I asked these questions because they're totally silly. They're impossible to answer. But do you have a favorite? This is yours. So tell me, is this a charcoal sketch?
This is an ink sketch.
An ink sketch, okay.
From the destruction of the war. So this is 1940s.
Right.
And this.
Oh my goodness, look at the detail.
Warsaw, where he was stationed at the press, I think they called it propaganda company or something, where they did the newspapers, and he would illustrate the stories to go back home about the war, how successful things were or what the progression was. Yes, he loved to do the details. And we have those in the Saskatoon bridges as well. So the style of simplistic to detail is all there.
Yeah. No, he was not only prolific, he had such different style.
He could do anything. It was amazing.
And there are all the art sets and the cards.
So
the jigsaw puzzles.
I have a rack here with items that I take to the artisan shows.
Okay.
So prints, even puzzles this year, and the very popular art cards that I take these, reduce them, and people can send them and say, hey, this is Saskatoon, right? You live in Vancouver now, but you remember Saskatoon. So really a good messenger. How beautiful Saskatoon is. Or how beautiful Saskatchewan is.
This is a career for you.
It could be. I'm pretty sure it's my retirement.
I can't imagine how you have time to do all of this.
I squeeze it in, yes.
Yeah.
And because it's such a positive experience, I don't set myself any deadlines. I just go through it and get the stories and enjoy.
Do you have a rough count on how many pieces there are?
My estimation at the start was about 10,000.
Yes.
And we have probably located 6,000 now. And right now the challenge is to add to the database the location of where they are, which drawer, which shelf, And this is where I dream of that gallery where I actually have enough drawers and enough space.
Right.
To show it all off, to see it myself.
Over here, is this scissor cutting?
That's my mother's art.
Did they influence each other? What was his reaction to what she was doing with scissor cutting?
It was very positive. It was basically an extension of what he tried to do with us as kids.
Yeah.
He tried to get us excited, as I said earlier.
Yeah.
Here, sketch this. It's so beautiful. So when the kids were gone, then he would go out with Waltraud and they would both do it in their own medium. She would do sketches on the back, of course, before you do the scissor cut.
Yeah.
And he would paint sketches to get an oil painting going. So there are often similar motifs.
Yes, exactly.
And I love it. You know, the Saskatoon is so recognizable.
Yeah.
The elevator is so recognizable.
Much like their relationship, they complement each other.
They really did.
They really do. Yeah.
They really did. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
no, he was very excited also with the puppetry for her.
Yes.
Did
he get involved in any of that?
Only he had to give up the living room for all her puppets.
Yeah.
Spread them out, because usually his paintings are spread out. But he actually did a painting of her behind the puppet theater.
Right.
Yeah, so that was really nice.
Right.
And yes, when they made brochures and things, the graphics for the exhibits and such, they would do that together.
I'm trying to think if who did the program for the impresario?
Probably my mother.
Yeah.
But they would critique each other's work.
Really?
Yes. Well, it's lovely to see how they worked on it together.
Right. Yeah. Out of curiosity, if people want to see this, can they pull up to the garage? Can they contact you to come and see it?
Yes, they can. Yeah. They can contact me, and I can give a tour.
Yeah.
What I usually do when someone is really interested is ask, "What do you want to see?"
Yeah.
So that I can dig out the relevant. You know, if they're not interested in elevators, then I'll bring out the mountains so that.
Right.
I don't have to do it while they're here.
Yeah, you've certainly got your pick of landscape to choose from.
I have much to dig, yes.
Did he travel throughout Canada and paint other provinces as well?
Yes, very much so. That is the Pacific coast.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and...
I was going to say it's either the Pacific or the Atlantic.
Yeah, and then my brother moved out east, and he went out there a lot and, of course, sketched. He took his little VW out in the driveway, that tiny little car.
So what's your daughter's role in all of this? Obviously, you've got some help.
The whole thing is a family affair.
Really?
Yes. The daughter that is here, she helps me at the Artisans Fair. And my daughter, who has moved to Berlin, was kind of the scanner, archivist, writer. Yes, I did find a letter that he had written back home. Yeah. I don't know, maybe he didn't send it. But he said in there, I come to this country and I see that the light shines so different on things.
Right.
And I interpret that to mean the wide open, right?
Yeah.
The wide open spaces and to be inspired.
It's amazing. I mean, there's a part of me that just wants to, I ache for the fact that this is hidden all here. I don't know. It's not from a lack of desire. It's a lack of opportunity and a lack of doors opening to get this stuff seen in the public.
The roadblock usually is the resources.
Yeah.
The time, for one thing, and then the space. The space is a challenge. When my father passed away, and I bought the house for my mother because I knew she couldn't do it, the first thing we really did was tear down his original garage. It was typical garage, tiny, full of paintings.
Who inspired him? Did he ever talk about artists that he really liked? Like, for example, was he inspired by the Group of Seven? Ever discussed?
He was very interested in what other people did.
Uh-huh.
He collected a lot of their things. He read their books. Uh-huh. Oh, the art books my parents have.
Yeah.
He really looked around and he really encouraged others to paint.
This will stay in your family. I have a feeling that the passion and the work behind all of this, does your daughter have children?
None yet.
No. I have a feeling it will.
I am not sure what will happen, and this is really my goal, is to have it organized and documented to be able to keep it, because the digital things are easy to keep.
Sure, yeah.
And then, especially the stories that I'm still getting from my parents and relatives. Where is this? So that I can add that to the database, right? He didn't have a database.
Right.
We are so lucky with computers. We have a database and we can put that information in there, the sizes, the medium, and then to leave that behind if I manage to complete this by the time.
But the collection, the physical collection, is also...
I don't know what will happen to it.
I know. It's got to stay alive somehow.
Donations is certainly one thing. Yes, definitely. Yeah. But this, I don't know if you can get a picture of this crate here. It's
a big wooden crate.
Big wooden crate about the size of a small garden shed.
Don't tell me that's all full.
Yes.
Wow.
But the story of the crate and why I've kept it is that is the crate that we used to come over here. That's all we brought.
Really?
Not that unlike pioneers, right? Because
it's like a gigantic pine box.
And crate. Then my husband put these drawers in here.
Oh, right. Okay. Full. It's in such good shape for having traveled so far.
They are full of hundreds.
Good heavens.
Hundreds of pastels and watercolors.
Staggering. He has to be one of the most prolific Canadian artists that lived.
I don't really know how others do it.
Yeah.
But I know from living with him all these, only 30 years of my life.
Yeah.
Any space he had was always too small.
Yeah.
So productive.
It really, it's drawers and drawers and drawers of this all laid out. The work that must go into this. I really hope that people listening to this take an opportunity, if they can, to come and see it. It really...
I would like to have a gallery in the near future here that is a bit more open to the public, or maybe do some pop-up gallery where I rent a space for maybe a month or two once I'm more organized.
Your mother had so many little gems of outlooks on life that she sort of plunked down in the middle of our conversation on Sunday, which are very, very profound. What kind of influence did your dad have on you as far as a perspective of and an outlook of life?
He was instrumental in showing me the beauty in nature. And as young children, it started not so much with the painting, but with the going outdoors. Yeah. He would take us outdoors and he would say, take a deep breath. It's so beautiful. And then, he'd get into the trees and the rivers and he would say, look at how the sun shines on this. And I have looked at things all my life like that.
Is that
beautiful?
Well, then that makes perfect sense that you chose the field of study and work that you've done, because again, it's being in touch with the land.
Yes, it is. It's hard to describe.
Yeah,
that a person can feel so good surrounded by nature as opposed to being indoors.
Yes,
and this was and to watch him paint. Of course, I'm not a painter, so I'm also really amazed how someone can take 3D and put it onto 2D so well. That is really impresses me. I did go to art school myself.
You did?
Yes, but my sketches and assignments really showed a 3D element to them.
Right.
So I would have done sculpture or something.
Where's your artwork?
Hiding.
What is it with your family and hiding artwork? Your mother has well displayed a lot of all of her puppetry, but
she has a lovely room upstairs.
Yeah, right. Yeah. How is the German Cultural Council involved with this? I mean, obviously they're aware of the work. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing this podcast.
Right.
But have you had events with them where you've had the opportunity to have some of this out?
With Waltraud, yes, we have. With my mom, yeah. With my dad, we are only just working on it. I've had the important people there, like Gabrielle and previous people, tour through here. Mm-hmm. But having had it in such chaotic state, we haven't come out with a plan yet.
Yeah.
But I'm sure we will.
You're very lucky to have had such insightful and artistic and outside of the box parents.
Yes.
They didn't do anything the conventional way.
Yes. It was difficult at times. I have to say there's always a shady side to all the bright sides.
Yeah.
Because art is it has a different place in society, and that changes over the years. Right?
And when you say darker, shadier side, do you mean the way that they as people are perceived?
Yes, they're just artists.
The just art, yeah. What do you?
Unlike my brother, who is an engineer.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, same thing with theaters. Oh, you're an actor, but what do you do? For
Why don't you get a real job?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And as children, I think we suffered most at that. Being in small communities where everyone kind of worked for Mercedes-Benz, right? That's where we grew up. They all had the real job.
Yeah.
And my dad, what does he do? He just paints. So those things were difficult. But when they came and looked, they thought, oh, wow, how do you do that?
Yeah.
So those things, they accompany you and you get used to them. And then you realize, wow, there's a story here and there's a story there. So a person with the same job every day isn't necessarily fulfilled.
Yeah.
Was my dad more fulfilled, or my parents? They struggled the same, trying to make a living, raise children. But
they had to have felt fulfilled because they were doing the thing that made them feel the most alive.
I can't say. My personal decision to leave the art world was because I saw the struggles.
Really?
Grandfather, mother, father.
Yes.
But possibly because of the politics.
Yeah.
That let them not be themselves and do their work successfully.
Yeah.
Especially when they tell you that don't be painting this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Right? So then what do you do as an artist?
Yeah.
I have to start again. I have to do what you did.
Yeah.
So that's an internal struggle. So fulfilled...
Sure.
It's frustration is what that is.
Following somebody's expectations of what you should be doing as opposed to...
And I think maybe a tiny little cloud was that my family expected me to do that as well. My father really wanted me to be an artist. And I thought, what if I don't want to be an artist?
That's so reverse to the typical story of go get yourself a real profession and do this on the side.
Isn't that, yeah. So they said you should go to art school.
Yeah.
All three of us girls went to art school in Alberta, yes. It was great.
Right.
But, looking realistically, how do I pay my mortgage if I'm
Yeah.
And that is like that in all art forms.
Yes.
Sadly, in today's times, there hopefully be times again where, yes, we'll pay you like we pay a football player.
Yeah. Oh, good luck with that. I mean, but I think people who go into the art form know they're not going into it to be rich. And
absolutely not.
You're never prepared for the struggle. You just live it. And take it as it comes.
And I wouldn't want to see my parents have done anything else because that's what they were really good at.
And then you touch very briefly on, there's a whole other story of your grandfather.
Oh, yes.
And his work, and some of that work still survives.
Yes, I actually...
And guess who's responsible for digitizing all of that as well?
Yes. I have done some.
Yeah.
And it is so very different. It's fascinating.
If you tell me that your grandfather's father was also an artist, my head is going to explode.
He was a detective.
He was a detective.
Yes.
Okay, so there was a deviation at some point.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
but as I said yesterday, the DNA and the lineage and the sensibility of the art form just lives in your family.
It's a lot. And having grown up in it, it's really hard to think that people could live without that.
Yeah. And, not everybody cares enough to maintain the legacy of their parents. So I think it's a great honor to them. And it also speaks volumes of your character. Because this could have easily been trashed when your father said trash it. And it could have just been a pain in the neck for you to look after and not care. Yeah. So the fact that you care speaks volumes of who you are as a person. It's a lovely story. Thank you for sharing your memories with me.
Well, thank you, Kevin, for your interest. You are most enthusiastically interested in that.
And seriously, if anybody listening to this is able to get to Saskatoon, go to one of the blogs in the show notes, get a hold of Barbara, Where there's a will, there's a way. You at least owe it to yourself to see this work. And if anybody's interested in any of the cards and the puzzles, they're fantastic sets. Also contact you. So that's fantastic. Thanks, Barbara.
Thank you, Kevin.
Hey, thanks for listening. Music for SaskScapes is provided by Saskatchewan-born singer-songwriter Jeffrey Straker. SaskScapes can be downloaded from iTunes, Google Play, the SaskScapes app for Android devices, and all of the other major podcasting apps. Stop by and say hi to us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter @SaskScapes. So tell me, what fuels the culture in your community? Who has a story that must be heard? Consider bringing SaskScapes to your part of the province. Email us at saskapes@gmail.com or find us on Facebook. Please share your thoughts on this episode or any of the episodes by writing a review in the iTunes Store or Google Play. Your star ratings help our audience grow. Remember, our stories are our legacy. Now, somewhere around the world for years to come, stories like those found in SaskScapes are being heard. Think about it. We're creating an oral archive so that who we are in this province is never forgotten. I'm Kevin Power. Join me again next time.